Hi, everybody. This is Meg Hansen. I am running to be the Republican nominee for Lieutenant Governor in the August 11th primary. And I am doing a Facebook Live this evening to give an update about what's happening with our campaign. So I've in the description, I'm not sure if you're able to access it while I'm recording, but in the description, I go through the points that I'm going to discuss. So um, first of all, I will just share a little bit about the media interviews that I've had this week. I had a radio interview with VPR, and I just finished a Vermont Digger interview. And they both kind of touched on the same topics, so I'll be happy to share them with you. The Vermont Digger one, now some of you might be thinking, wait, didn't you just have a profile? Yes, I did. This is more based on the election guide that I've shared a link a little while ago. They put together a reader-generated survey, an extensive candidate questionnaire, and so this was a video, shorter version of that. He was saying the digital editor was saying that some people prefer getting their answers through video platforms. So that was why we recorded that as well. Now the topics that they asked were related to how do we help Vermont recover from the COVID crisis, the lieutenant governor's position specifically, why do I want to run for it, and what would I bring to it, my views on climate change, my views on systemic racism, the broadband issue, which is a perennial topic here in Vermont. And I was expecting them to talk or ask me more about the mandate for face masks, also about reopening schools, but they didn't go into such specifics. They were just sort of broad topics. So as far as why do I want to be, or why am I running for the office of Lieutenant Governor, I think I've been very clear about what I'm trying to achieve. Just two things that I like to add right now is that I would bring diversity and balance to the Senate. The Lieutenant Governor presides over the state Senate. By diversity, I don't mean my gender or ethno-racial genetic makeup. I mean my geographic diversity, because my personal and professional life has been rooted and grounded in different parts of southern Vermont for the last decade, which is 1/3 of my life. And so I have a good understanding about the issues that people in largely rural parts feel. And so it's important to have that voice and that representation. I've talked before, and I think most of you know, that Vermont State Senate has 6 senators from one county, from Chittenden County. And we don't see that kind of unequal, unfair, in my opinion, representation anywhere across the state. So bringing that is very important. Having a very robust interactive constituent services program is also very important, because we have an accountability crisis and a transparency crisis in our government. And it's very important for Vermonters to know what is happening, where are our monies going. So that's one aspect of it. Okay, so I'm seeing a question. I'm going to answer that question before I get to the other points. This is from Jeff Elliott. He says, where do I stand on the second Jeff, I'll be happy to share my detailed position. I've written it in a note on my page. I 100% stand by our constitutional rights. My understanding, or this is how I look at our Constitution, it is a supreme law of the land. And it's not open to interpretation. It's not a living document, as some people like to claim. And so it's not susceptible, or should not be susceptible, to the whims and fancies of the day. So I don't support any infringements whatsoever. And this includes something known as red flag laws, also waiting periods. I definitely do not support increasing the age to 21 or any other time. And as where do I stand in terms of the recent changes that were implemented, I don't support them. So it's very clear. I don't look at this as a black and white issue at all. I don't. And your next question. Okay, this is good. Now I'm seeing some comments where people are, and I had to learn this too, so I don't blame anybody for it. People are sort of confusing absentee and early ballot voting with what is known as mass mail-in voting. So what happens with an absentee or early ballot is that you have to specifically request for it through your town clerk, and then you get the, and in Vermont, the law is that you can do it for any reason. So you don't have to give a reason for it. You can just ask for it, and then fill in the ballot, and then you mail it back. That's the system that's happening right now. It's in place, and a lot of people, apparently a record number, are requesting for an absentee or early ballot. This is the normal law. This has been, law in Vermont, and that is still continuing into the primary election, which is on August 11th. Mass mail-in voting is completely different. That is a new system that we've never had in Vermont, and that is where the Vermont Secretary of State, the town clerks, they will mail out ballots, so legitimate ballots, to every person, every address on the voter roster or the lists. So that means if you've ever lived in Vermont and your name's on that and you never got rid of it, you moved away, or maybe you passed away and it's still there, that you will get, or that name, that address will get a ballot. And that's what we're concerned about. See, if those voter rosters were regularly updated, purged, cleaned, where people who are no longer with us, people who've moved away, if all those people are not there and it's just US citizens who are Vermont residents getting one ballot each, then great, go for it, right? But it's obviously not the case. So I take a lot of issue with people dismissing this concern as and calling it voter suppression. I've called out my primary opponent for that because, raising this important concern and saying we're worried about it. We want, of course, all of us want every citizen to vote once in the state of your residency. Of course, we want that. Why would we not want that? But we also want it to be legitimate. We want to protect the integrity of our elections. We want to preserve that. So if we are concerned that the system right now has not been cleaned or updated and there might be issues, then calling that out or raising concerns about that should not be dismissed, should not be put aside, and we should certainly not be condemned for wanting to protect and preserve the integrity of our elections. It's not about making it easy to vote or not. It's about protecting the integrity of our elections. That is the bedrock of our constitutional republic. So that's where I stand on that topic. So now I'm going to continue with the agenda that I've posted right there. And this is about how would I approach COVID recovery. So in terms of an economic recovery, right now we know that Vermont faces a $400 million budget shortfall, and the true extent of this will only reveal itself over the course of the next year, because we're still closed. The state of emergency is still August 15th, so it's going to be bad, right? It's going to be something that we really have to reckon with. So how would the question that a lot of media interviews posed to me was, how would you approach it? So to this, okay, I'm get distracted when the comment pops up, but I'll continue my train of thought. So to this, my approach is what I learned in medical school. Now, I may not practice medicine, but those years were very formative, and they informed the way I approach problem solving. So when there's a problem, what you have to do is identify the underlying issue, the underlying cause, not concern yourself with just treating the symptoms. So when people talk about broadband, for example, oh, we don't have broadband, then, or even, childcare, we're talking about that, or minimum wage. These are symptoms to the underlying problem. What is the underlying problem? The underlying problem is that Vermont has a structurally weak economy. Why is it weak? Because Vermont has the strictest regulatory burden and one of the highest punishing tax burdens in the nation. That's the problem. Even more than taxes, it's the regulations that shackles and holds down economic growth and economic development. A lot of people talk about Act 250, that gets a lot of attention. But if you've tried to use land. So this is the land use regulations. If you've ever tried to open a business or expand your property or do anything, you would know that there are several local zoning ordinances, permitting processes, fines, fees that all get triggered before you actually get to Act 250. So this is the main problem. This is what's causing the lack of upwardly mobile jobs. People talk about increasing the minimum wage. They talk about a livable wage. Well, we have seen the statistics and the data has clearly shown that constantly increasing the minimum wage has not led to wage growth. We want wage growth. Which means more money in your pockets. That means you're creating wealth, and then you're able to buy a home. You're able to save for retirement, raise children, and afford to live. That's what you want. That wage growth has not happened by doing things like minimum wage, increasing the minimum wage. It's not happened. We don't have jobs where you can rise up into the middle class. In fact, we've seen more and more Americans are falling out of the middle class because of the way that the economy is structured. In Vermont, it's particularly bad because of regulations and taxes that have caused middle class families, young people, working professionals to abandon Vermont. And many seniors have been compelled to leave their lifelong homes and have to go to Florida or North Dakota, Idaho, somewhere else where they can live comfortably on their fixed incomes. So that's how I would look at it. I would look at deregulation as the number one way to go forward. And what happens when you deregulate? You're able to diversify the economy. Right now, our economy is basically, well, the private sector is anemic, absolutely anemic, and it's completely dependent on the service sector and tourism. And as you've seen with COVID and the extended lockdown, that's completely devastated. An economy that doesn't make things cannot last. So it's absolutely important for us to have manufacturing, to have businesses of all sizes. The ones that stay here should be able to flourish, and others will come as well. So deregulation is important. And on this point, I'm going to talk about the Trump administration and why I support the administration. So I said in my Vermont PBS debate, and I've also talked about it in my profile, I say exactly why I support the Trump administration. And the main reason is because I believe that you have to look at policies, and policies that improve the lives of Americans deserve our full support. Before COVID struck and the whole pandemic turned the world upside down, the Trump administration was responsible for record low, historically low unemployment rates for everybody, but especially women and minority groups, Hispanic populations, Black Americans, African American populations, right? And, I'm not going to deny that. I mean, I am a minority woman, and that's important to me. I know it's hard. It's hard to, make it in life. Not because of systemic racism or things like that. It's just hard, when you're on your own and you have to make it. Culture matters, support matters. But I know that of all the nations that I've actually lived in other places, I know that in terms of merit and competence, if you really want to make it, this nation gives you opportunities that nobody else does. So it really matters to me that there's low unemployment. Now, to that, in these interviews, a lot of people said, and I've also seen in comments, they're like, well, the Trump administration inherited low unemployment from the Obama administration, because when President Obama left office, it was already trending downward, and so he inherited that. Now, I disagree with that because we have to look at specifically at the low unemployment rates. Vermont also has very low unemployment rates, but that's because most people are not looking for jobs. They're out of the job market. That is not the same as what we're seeing with the Trump administration. This is specifically, of course, the Tax Cuts Act that they passed, but also because of the massive deregulation, the massive deregulatory program that the Trump administration has enacted. And that is what has opened up the economies of various states, not Vermont, because we have Act 250, we have all these different structures here. So Vermonters haven't been able to enjoy it as much as people, let's say, in New Hampshire or Idaho. But basically opening up the economy and allowing people to create wealth, more wealth, have more money in their pockets. This is the regular deregulatory program that has been in place. So I actually, so since people were pushing back and saying, oh no, that's not true, you can't give him credit for that, I have statistics that I would like to share with you. So first of all, let's just understand what happens when you overregulate rulemaking. What happens when you do that? Well, we have to understand that as a type of covert or secret taxation. It hurts businesses, it hurts households, it increases the cost of everything. In Vermont, for example, people talk about the lack of affordable housing. Why does that happen? It's because of all the regulations that increase the costs of developing homes, residential homes, and then the developers pass it on to the homeowners pass it on to their renters, and that's the cycle that goes on. So from 2017 to 2020, so that's 3 years, a, a comprehensive report was published looking at the deregulations that have happened. And what we've seen is that this episode or this program is comparable to or actually exceeds any other deregulatory program that has been undertaken in modern US history. So the closest comparison is the Carter administration. During that time, we saw historic deregulations of the airline industry, trucking, railroads, energy. The Trump administration, what it has done in the last 3 years is beyond that. And so how do we quantify that? Now, regulations disproportionately hurt lower income families. That's the way that it trends. So because of the last 3 year period of deregulation, now it has increased the purchasing power of lower income families in America by 15%. That is quantifiable. Specifically, we've seen deregulation in employment related, consumer or purchasing power related, and also energy sector. So this is a really good thing. I don't know how everything has changed now because of COVID. I have no idea, but this is my response. And so my proposal, my solution for helping Vermonters is deregulation. We need massive deregulation. And when we've seen that minorities, women, and all Americans have been benefited across the nation because of deregulation at the federal level, I mean, why shouldn't that be a reason to get 100% behind this particular administration? So so that's my point that I would say to my supporting the president. Now I'll talk a little bit about a post that I wrote yesterday. It was sort of like an open letter to supporters of our Hansen campaign of, small towns and big hearts. Now the reason why I did that is because, as you know, right now it's a really, really unprecedented, unusual campaign season where you have a state of emergency way past the election. And it's clear if that's the case, then, and we're not able to, freely mingle, not able to have events, 1 in 4 Vermonters are out of a job. That really causes, ethical questions about fundraising. All of those problems. This obviously would hurt a first-time candidate like myself more than an incumbent, and certainly if somebody who has very deep pockets. So I think that we should, it's incumbent on the candidate to be the best possible candidate she can. In this case, I'm trying my best. And that for our campaign to reach out for help. And in terms of an organized group, in Vermont, we have Trump supporters. And so, reach out to Trump supporters and say, please help. If you believe in our message and you believe that this is the way forward, and we have to fundamentally change the way Vermont works, then please come and help us out. I expected the left maybe to jump on that and say, oh, look at her, she's a Trump supporter or something like that. But no, instead, we had some people who are in the Republican Party, but don't agree with the president or, take issue with that, taking screenshots of, like a newsletter or a campaign material and putting it out on social media and trying to shame me and disqualify me. That's really problematic. I think that's problematic. Of course, we can all agree with that. But what I've noticed is that, they can criticize me. Let's say they criticize. I know that there's criticism. You step into the public arena, it happens. But, they criticize me, right? But when I push back, then it's, oh my God, how dare she? Then it's all about, you can't take constructive criticism. Is this how you run for office, Meg? Is this who you are? Like, then it's all personal attacks. I'm like, well, I was just minding my own business. You're the one who came and attacked me in the first place. Why am I not allowed to stand up for myself? Right? Why can't I defend myself? And if I feel like what you're doing is bullying me and trying to shame me, why don't I have a right to stand up and say, no, you're not going to do that? I don't see anything wrong with that. So that brings me to this point about what the August 11th election is. And that's about values. I believe it's about values. It's an election where our values are on the line. What do I mean by that? So the criticism that that particular group that I talked about that tried to shame me yesterday, their criticism is that I am an ideological candidate, that I have an ideology which somehow makes me too far right for Vermont or somehow disqualifies me. This has always bothered me. This is not something new. They talk about this all the time. It really bothers me, right? Because in Vermont, we actually have a progressive party. We have people who feel that they are so left off the Democratic Party that they don't want to be part of the Democratic Party. Ideology on the left is celebrated. It's celebrated. Bernie Sanders is celebrated for having the same ideological points for 40 years. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been elevated to a superstar status, some would argue, because she primaried a Democrat, and she's pushing this far left, she calls it herself, far left progressive ideology. So the left can have it, but when the right has it, it's a problem. Really? Why? This is what I didn't understand. So when the right fights for our values and our convictions, then it's oh look, you're polarizing the debate. So as long as there's only one pole, right? There's only one pole, the left pole, everything's good. When it's the right pole where you're standing up for yourself, oh, you're polarizing it. I don't care for this kind of hypocrisy. I find it very, very problematic. And why is that important? Because see, when I'm campaigning, I know it's unusual, and I'm campaigning in this way, mostly digital, but I've encountered a deep sense of a betrayal among right of center Vermonters. They really feel betrayed because they voted for somebody who would say that he would do something and then didn't do it. A deep sense of disappointment in elected politicians, and then a concern, a wariness, a cynicism that maybe I would do the same. And it's not just me. I've spoken with other House and Senate candidates who also encounter that. So other Republicans, especially first-time candidates, trying to make it, we experience this a lot on the campaign trail, where Vermonters are, they're cynical. They're like, you're just saying this to get into office, and once you get into office, you'll change your tune. That's why it's a values election, because when you judge a candidate, sure, you can judge them on their platform. Sure, you can judge them on their policies, their knowledge of the issues, their character. But if you really want to have a sense of connection and a sense of certainty, assuredness, like, okay, this person is going to do what he says or do what she says, it's important to understand what is their driving philosophy. What is their ideology? Yes. What informs their engagement with politics? And for me, I've been very clear. It's classical liberalism. What is that? That is was born in the 18th century in Scotland. The Scottish Enlightenment was very, very important, where we had Adam Smith and his book, The Wealth of Nations, that was published in 1776. This is what informed the founding of our nation, the writing of our Constitution. James Madison was very deeply informed by the work of Smith. Our documents, the tenets on which this nation is founded, comes from that. And then there is a school of thought which is known as American conservatism, and that's different from European conservatism. That's very, very different. The European conservatism is more about, you know, monarchy, protecting the monarchy, and it's more you know, it's sort of, it's very different from what we have here, because, you know, there's something, you know, the theory of the soil being born there, blood, you know, things like that, which becomes sort of tribalistic, and then we've seen some ugly versions of that raise their head in the mid 20th century. That's different. We don't have that here. In terms of the school of thought, which is known as American conservatism, that is about economic freedom, capitalism, prosperity, which is not just financial abundance, but also personal liberty and individual responsibility. So these are the things that inform my understanding. So if you think about, okay, this is a particular issue. What is Meg's position? Well, now you know where I'm coming from. How do I don't just randomly think about, oh, what will get me the vote? What will attract me this person? What will make me more attractive to this demographic or that? No, I don't do that. I just look at, these are the frames of mind and schools of thought through which I address the issues. My medical training is also very important. I look at a lot of issues from a medical perspective, and also my problem solving. So the way that I was taught medicine was a really, really rigorous program, and it was where you have to really do a deep dive into all the information and then come to an informed conclusion, and you have to have coherence of logic, and you have to be able to defend what you are saying. So all of that in terms of rational reason, debate, nuance. I specifically appreciate nuance, not just black and white, and looking at all of that and coming to an informed conclusion. That is how I address issues. That is how I arrive at my stance on any particular topic. That is how I came up with the platform for advocating for prosperity. And that is how the three pillars are about economic freedom, healthcare freedom, and education freedom. So that's where I am on that issue. Okay, and so I'm almost done. Okay, now I'm gonna, my last point that I will say, actually there are two more points. So my last point I will say is that a lot of people in these interviews have been asking me about systemic racism. And I find myself, in all honesty, between a rock and a hard place. Because on the left, we see this growing movement of where people are calling America as a systemically racist nation. The claim is that the founding of our nation, the structures that make America America, are steeped in white supremacy. And I completely flat out disagree with that. It's wrong. It's just wrong. That is not at all the case. The founding of our nation, the structures actually paved the way to end slavery and end discrimination. That's what actually happened when people followed the ideals and principles that were set forth in the Constitution, in our founding documents by our founding fathers. When people followed that, it led to the end of it. And in fact, Martin Luther King Jr. appealed to that and said, let's go back to that and let's look at that right in the document. So I don't agree with that claim at all. And I also believe that when you do that, right, when you say every American who is of European heritage, and so therefore, you know, white, is inherently racist because of a collective guilt, this collective sin that they just have. They just have it, and so they have to atone for it, but there's no way to atone for it, so they're always to blame. No, I think this is a very destructive, problematic ideology, and the only outcome that will come from that is to deeply divide and destabilize our society. So I don't agree with that at all. And I can tell you that, you know, I was born in India. I left when I was 7 months, and that is the best thing that my family could do. The best thing ever. That it's one of my biggest blessings, really. Biggest blessings that I didn't have to grow up there. I didn't have to grow up in that society, which is, as you know, segregated into castes and women. That's so. Okay, I'm not hating on India. I'm proud of my Indian heritage. I'm very proud of my Indian heritage, and there are great traditions there. But the modern society as it is today has still divides people into castes, no matter what you hear. That's the case, and women are second-class citizens. There are 40 to 60 million women missing from that population because they were aborted or infanticide. So a young baby was buried alive. We're looking at deep systemic and structural problems there, and I'm very fortunate that I didn't grow up there. I've had an opportunity to live in many parts of the world, and I can tell you from my personal experience, and anybody else who also shares my kind of background will tell you that this nation, the United States of America, this nation gives people opportunities that we don't get anywhere else. This is a nation where people accept you more than they accept you anywhere else. This is a place where doors. Now, I'm not saying that there are no exceptions, things happen, but I'm saying if you stand up and you say the basis of merit and the basis of the fact that I want to do well, yes, there'll be opposition, that's life, but everything is relative. So when you look at all the societies and you look at this nation, the blessings that we have, the opportunities that we have, the agency, which means the ability to act that we have here, we don't have it anywhere else. No one else enjoys it. And so I stand by that. And if that is my experience, and I'm not alone in that, I know that this is not a systemically racist society. Now, why did I say that I'm stuck between a hard place, a rock and a hard place? Because when I say that, then people who are on the far left call me a race traitor. This one lady said, I'm ashamed of you. You've let down brown people. Which is weird. I was like, well, you're upper class white woman. This is a weird thing for you to be saying to me. But I get that on the one hand. And I say, no, it's not systemically racist. Okay, you're a race traitor. Great. And then what happens? Then there are people who call themselves on the right. I call them reactionaries. Who tell me to go back to India. And I'm just like, okay, guys, what are you doing? No. So I'm not a Vermonter. I've lived in Vermont for the last 10 years, okay? We lived in West Windsor. We lived in near Woodstock, and now we live in Manchester. I've visited my sibling. I've visited my friends for 3 weeks, on the West Coast. I visit my mother-in-law in Connecticut. She has a place in Florida. We stayed there for our honeymoon. My husband and I went to Disney World for our honeymoon, and we stay there. So we have that opportunity. It's a great privilege and a great blessing. But just because I stay somewhere for a few weeks here and there doesn't mean that my primary residence is not Vermont. It doesn't mean that I'm not a permanent resident of Vermont who pays taxes here, who comes here, who has a home here. I mean, but to use that and say I'm not a Vermonter, I don't belong here, I have no business running for public office because I'm trying to jump into Vermont's lieutenant governor's seat from India. So this kind of stuff is why I said I'm not going to defend that. I don't want to call anybody out or get into any of that. This is an ugly route that I don't want anything to do with. But I'm just putting it out there and saying that I'm in a really weird position. I'm just getting it from all sides. And frankly, how does this help Vermonters? How does this help you when your property tax bill comes? Is it any less? No. How does it help you when you're not happy with the education that your child is getting, when you're not happy with how much money you're putting in and the outcomes, the learning outcomes? How does that help when we talk about systemic racism and how the founding fathers are actually white supremacists, and then people telling me to go back to India? I mean, how does any of this noise, it's just noise pollution, help us in terms of staying in the middle class, upward mobility, being able to buy a house, solving the demographic crisis, having economic growth and development? It doesn't do that. These things just take away from that. So I'm going to focus on the momentum that we have. It's definitely a great momentum that all of us are. You can see it. It's on Facebook. It's everywhere. We see the signs everywhere, and I'm really, really optimistic and charged about it. On that note, I will ask for your help. This is a request. Please reach out to your family members, your neighbors, members in your community, your colleagues who are over the age of 60 and who may not be on Facebook and may not be online. Maybe just use email sporadically. Why? Because just the way things have happened because of COVID and the lockdown, it's forced us to be 98%, 95% online, be digital. you have this kind of Zoom conferences, Zoom webinars, Facebook Live. We've also done peer-to-peer texting, which is one-on-one texting in order to reach people, but that's not a landline, you know? So it would be really, 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 really helpful to our campaign if you shared our campaign message and my candidacy with people that you know who are near and dear to you, who may not be online and not be able to, you know, watch a video like this. So with that, thank you very much for your time. I will do another one of these updates soon. I sincerely appreciate your support. Many of you have told me that you've already voted for me, so thank you very much for that. And my final sign off is, I know you're fighting hard. I know that, I hear you, I feel it. And I promise that I am also fighting just as hard and harder. Keep fighting, and I will keep fighting for you. Unknown but fiery is what she said, right? As my Digger platform. I don't know how long I'll be unknown, but I will always be fiery. I will always have fire in my belly, fire in my spirit to fight for you. Because I believe in what we're doing, and I believe that our message is reaching out there and resonating, and we will have change. We will have change this year. This is my promise to you. Thank you.